Well, my friends, it's been a banner year for Americans noticing sexual harassment and assault. The thing they seem to avoid noticing is just how normal all of this sexual harassment and assault is. Now, please don't misunderstand me. Normal does not mean okay. For the past few weeks, we've all been reading about a lot of bad shit that happened to our female friends, lovers, mothers, sisters, daughters, granddaughters, and many of the posts started like this. Suggested by a friend, if all of the women that have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote "Me Too" as a status, hashtag "Me Too" as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem. But you can't get a sense of the magnitude of this problem because the number of women who have been the victim of sexual harassment is, with few exceptions, all of them. And if a friend or loved one of yours didn't post the hashtag, it's almost certainly because they chose privacy, because they just couldn't bear the thought of daddy or grandma reading about the horrible shit that happened to them. Many of my female friends who have confided in me in the past did not post a hashtag MeToo story for exactly those reasons. Even so, some of those hashtag MeToos really beat me up. It's terrible to hear about all the shitty experiences, the sexual assaults, the date rapes, and much more that happened to all of your female friends, all of the women that you love. And even though I knew all of this, even though it wasn't in any way surprising to me, it still gave me a panicky feeling about the world that my baby daughter is growing up into. Now, I have rarely been in an intimate relationship with a woman who didn't have a scar, a hashtag MeToo story from her past. It turns out to be a universal story, and it's universal because it's in the fabric of our culture, what many women have been raging about as rape culture, hashtag rape culture. From hip hop to Hollywood to the hallowed halls of the Houses of Congress, this kind of thing is criminal and horrifying on the one hand and actually glorified on the other. Many years ago in another life and under a different pen name, I worked in Hollywood, both as a writer and as a producer. And I can remember being at Sports Club LA with a wealthy producer who bragged about his ability to pressure women into sex, using promises of help or hindrance to their careers. And I can remember a broke, absolutely zero success, zero contacts, zero opportunities talent manager. This guy was nobody, bragging to me that he started his management agency on the side just for the pussy. And in breathless, giddy excitement, he said it was the best thing he ever did, actually pointing to the actual couch in his actual cheap office. And sitting at the bar at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills with some young and highly successful CAA agents who were bragging about the main perk of the job, piling story upon story upon story, competing to outdo each other in the lurid details of their casting couch conquests. Now, I don't think any of these guys were using physical force and raping women the way Harvey Weinstein has been accused of doing, but they bragged about the intense pressure that their positions allowed them to apply. And they bragged about it being incredibly effective. The fact is, when an Ivy League grad chooses the mailroom at CAA over the phone bank cold calling minds of Lehman Brothers, they're doing it for the promise of the kind of social status that only Hollywood can provide. The constant stream of beautiful girls with big dreams who were stars back in their hometown high school productions and are absolutely nobody in Hollywood. And in my 20s at the time, sitting there with those douchebag agents at the Peninsula, honestly, I was disgusted. I was revolted. And I was still immature enough to also be impressed and even jealous that they had this power. And I laughed and I grinned and I played cool because, you see, I knew how much these guys could do for my career too. And to be clear, the guys that chose Wall Street over Hollywood or any other thing, they're all eyeing the big money for the social status and the sexual payoff in pussy that money and status represent, because that's what our biology tells us to do. I bought that Ferrari and that Audemars Piguet jumbo wristwatch for purely practical reasons, said nobody ever. So as near as I can figure, Harvey Weinstein isn't the only boogeyman in Hollywood. He's just the man who was left holding the hot potato when the music stopped. I mean, let's be honest. Harvey Weinstein is most famous for making incredibly good bets, greenlighting hit movies, and for being the biggest asshole in Hollywood, a town that is nearly synonymous with assholes. So it's predictable that someone is eventually going to call the turd a turd or the rapist a rapist and use the truth against him. And all of the heroic actresses coming forward now, I understand as more details come out that some of them, and particularly those who were physically assaulted, may have been under the kind of psychological fear and post-trauma stress that made it really impossible for them to come forward. But for many others, many who chose to become close friends with Weinstein in the aftermath, I say to you, you are complicit too. A crime like this takes two, or maybe in this case 200. The man who thinks that he can get away with it, and the woman who wants him to get away with it, because her career is more important to her than the problem of letting him get away with it. And more important to her than letting him get away with it with the next woman and the next woman. As the old story goes, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire could do, but in high heels and going backwards. A dance takes two. And these women might have been angry, and they might have been disgusted and revolted and humiliated and even fearful. But let's please not leave out willing to let him get away with it. And that, my friends, is also part of hashtag rape culture. It's every man everywhere growing up with raging and perfectly natural desires to get laid, but shamed for in the light of day and in the shadows, a tacit, universal, and observable with his own eyes everywhere story from both men and women that he has to figure out a way to get past the girl to get to the pussy. And amongst men, whether at the Peninsula Hotel in Beverly Hills or on the job at a construction lot at lunchtime whistling at the chicks, or on a tour bus with Billy Bush, it's not shamed, it's celebrated. And until every woman flees the dance floor when a DJ plays a misogynist hip-hop song glorifying this shit rather than choosing option two, twerking for the men so that it's clearly understood what they have that we need to try hard to get from them, then this shit is never ever going to go away. And of course, cue the piles of outrage and how dare you emails. Am I really saying that there's no difference between the perpetrator and the victim? Am I condoning the rapist and blaming the victim of the crime? Am I saying they were asking for it? Abso-fucking-lutely not. I am horrified, I am brokenhearted, and I am filled with seething rage that men get away with this shit every single day. From the fraternity house pool table to the courts that don't take this kind of thing terribly seriously. And that is rape culture. Hashtag rape culture everywhere. And I'm back to square one, feeling panicky for my daughter. Now, I've been doing my part for the last 10 years, trying to help men grow the fuck up, trying to help them reach that point in maturity that one hopes for in adolescence, or at worst, young adulthood, when some trusted adult tells them in a way they can actually understand and believe sex isn't something you get from women. It's something you get to share with a woman. Well, apparently it's up to me. And let me tell you, it's slow going, folks. And to be honest, most of the women out there are not really being helpful. Women marched in the street all over the United States protesting President Trump. Thank you. Thank you for that. Like those young CAA agents, Mr. Trump, now the president of our nation, bragged and giggled about his privilege allowing him to grab pussy because he was famous. And Billy Bush laughed along, just like I did with those agents at the bar in the Peninsula. And after a few Republican congressmen expressed their absolute outrage, their line in the sand that the innocent faces of their wives and daughters would never, ever let them cross, and then realized that their base was going to take away their big dreams in the next primary if they didn't get with the program and just go along with it. Just like those actresses that didn't blow the whistle on Mr. Weinstein for decades. Not to mention blow the whistle on that other producer, that other director, the agent, or come on, their whole goddamn lives. Because this is a rape culture. And I don't want to be overly cynical, but I will tell you the truth that I don't see a lot of other people telling. Trump got away with it simply because you can't sue the federal government in civil court for the president grabbing your pussy. But if Harvey grabbed your pussy, you can and you will sue the Weinstein Company. And that's that. One's a financial liability and one's not. Harvey got booted, the president remains in office, like so many other perpetrators. So thank you, women that marched. Thank you, men that marched with them. But much as we might want it to be, this really isn't about Trump. This is about our species. And that brings us to the uncomfortable truth about rape culture, which is that it wasn't Trump or Republicans or serial rapist Harvey Weinstein or Roger Ailes or Hollywood or hip hop that invented this problem. It's biology. We are, at the beginning of the day, a rape species. That's right, hashtag rape species. Now, we can and should hope for better by the end of the day, but our day begins with our biology, and rape is baked into the beast right along with hunger and the will to live. In fact, if we want to continue with honesty about our despicable rape culture, we'd have to admit that women are very likely safer from rape and sexual assault and sexual harassment than at any other time during human history. It's quite a recent historical evolution that every battle doesn't end with the rape and enslavement of the women, the execution of the fighting age men and the enslavement of the young boys. And battles used to be seasonal, not generational, global, not isolated to foreign fields far from the homeland. Forget evil and wrong. It wasn't even bad manners in ancient times. In the Bible, for that matter, rape was normal. The urge to take a woman was only ever tempered in our species by the fear of retribution from her powerful family. Rape culture has always been wired into human culture. Of course, we've always been horrified by it when it visited our own wives and daughters, and so, thankfully, laws were written, and at least now we criminalize it, we shame it, and we get pissed off by it, even in the homes of strangers, even in the homes of our enemies. We are getting much better, but we are not there yet. And from my perspective, teaching sexuality to men for the past decade, I can tell you that at the moment, things are moving in the wrong direction. From my perspective, at least, things are getting worse during my lifetime. And I have no idea if it's porn or Hollywood and hip hop that are a cause or simply the effect, but I can't remember a time in my half century of life when men and women were more mistrustful of each other. We have got to grow up. And when I say we can do better, when I say we have to grow up, of course, I'm talking to the men, and especially to the fathers of men. But I am talking to women too. Let's be clear in our boundaries. Let's never let a man get away with rape, assault, or using his powerful position to manipulate women into putting sex on the table as a bargaining chip for her career, or her safety, or just her social acceptance. It's quite safe to say that hundreds of both men and women knew that there was a rapist in their midst and did nothing. But equally, let's not pretend that a man who lacks Mr. Weinstein's power of retribution has committed a crime because of what are natural desires. Because when you do that, when you make him wrong for being a human, and you set a frustrating standard that he cannot meet amidst all of this metoo. I saw a post from a woman on Facebook asking women to chime in on how they felt when a man who wasn't their lover called them sexy. And about half of them said, I love it. And half of them said, I feel violated and disgusted. And only one honest woman said, it depends on the man who's saying it. Now, I won't out her, but I will thank her for telling the truth. Look, thinking a woman is sexy is in our blood. Thinking about how we want her, thinking about how we might get her is in our blood. It's not optional. It's not bad manners. It's biology. And it's not in any way related to rape culture. And it's certainly not the makings of a hashtag #MeToo story. And it's in women's blood too. And most sexually active men and a whole lot of honest women can tell you that plenty of women request being treated roughly, held down, tied down, even slapped around in the bedroom. It's natural. Plenty of women find themselves most attracted to the most aggressive men. We're made of meat, and we are programmed to avoid death and to seek sexual gratification. We've got to work that into the problem. It's simply unfair to have non-human expectations of humans. And trying to enforce those expectations is the enemy of learning how to maturely govern and control our animal impulses. The guy that doesn't tell a woman that she's sexy when she is sexy is holding it back for a reason, be that shyness or monogamy or manners, or more likely fear of rejection or humiliation because he thinks he's got a better shot at getting sex if he holds his cards close to the chest. Now, I'm cool if all of us get together and decide as a society that men shouldn't ever call a woman sexy again, but that's never going to happen. I mean, the women themselves don't want that to happen. They send their own mixed messages on this point, and I don't think that most of us actually want that to go away. So a little compassion for all of us. It's hard to be a human with human desires these days. And what I've seen from the men is a growing frustration, and that frustration fuels the problem. A feeling that they're trapped in this. Denying men the right to feel human feelings creates an impossible, unwinnable game for them that feeds their anger and their resentment and sends them backwards towards the immature anchor of their biology that says, sex is something I have to get or take from a woman. Now, this isn't an unwinnable battle. You know, we're also a warlike and murderous species, but we have worked together as a common team to be understanding that anger is natural, but we're all clear that no company is going to pay hush money to cover up an executive's murder habit. So my recommendation, let's save our righteous indignation for the men who don't control their actions and actually commit assault, who use force or jerk off into the potted plant or grab a woman by the pussy on the elevator. Let's save our righteous indignation for those who let them get away with it, from the accomplices to the courts. And let's allow that men simply can't and probably shouldn't control their sexual thoughts. Shaming them is making it worse. Shaming them is making them feel powerless. Shaming them is enabling those bragging conversations. And shaming women is allowing Harvey to get away with it. Shaming them is giving them a story they can tell themselves to justify their anger towards women or to justify their silence. Now, I've been reminded by many close friends, and I am starkly aware of the contrast and wrongs here. Men fear humiliation at the hands of women, and women fear rape and murder at the hands of men. There is no equivalence. But we're a rape species, and pretending we're not isn't going to make it go away. And if men and women can't start working together for greater understanding, if we can't together arrive at the mature understanding that sex is something to be shared and not taken or gotten or won or traded for, then we're going to be a culture in which the President of the United States can grab women by the pussy and get away with it. And our daughters are less safe than our mothers were.